Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is David Simpson. I'm one of the instructors with Themis, and I'm glad that you could join us today for the webinar. As you can see on the slide, you can go out to our website, themisinc.com/webinars, and out there you'll find, or you'll be able to download a copy of today's slides from the presentation. And you'll also be able to see other webinars that we have coming up and view past webinars as well. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. A lot of John's other work is out there, and it's a great resource that you have available to you. So www.themisinc.com/webinars. So it's my pleasure today to introduce you to John Mullins. Many of you have seen him before in DB2 classes. His email address is on the screen there, and he doesn't mind if you email him questions during or after the webinar. He loves to talk about Oracle, and I'm sure he would be happy to continue to interact with you. John is the guy that I go to when I have questions about Oracle. He is the lead developer for our Oracle curriculum and the lead instructor for all things Oracle with Themis. He's been working with it for a long time, as you can see there on the slide, and he teaches for us on a regular basis, not just Oracle, but you may have also seen him if you've taken classes with us with Java and some DB2 and SQL, really on all platforms. So he's a pretty versatile guy, and we're lucky to have him speaking to us today about some new stuff. Just a little bit about a word from our sponsor. So Themis is sponsoring the webinar today. We teach classes on a variety of IT topics. You can see some of them listed there. You can see a complete list of them on our website under the courses tab. Themisinc.com is the place to go. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the webinars tab on our website, you can also get the slides from today's presentation, as well as look at upcoming webinars and even view the past ones. We've been doing about one of these a month for the last 4 years or so. So there's quite a bit of history out there, both Oracle and other IT topics that we offer. So you can get a little sense of what we're able to deliver for you by just checking out some of the previous webinars. We have a couple of upcoming classes that we'd like you to be aware of. Well, we have, I guess, a lot of the material that you're seeing here will come from or be featured in a bunch of these classes. So you'll be able to see all of those detailed outlines for each one on the website. In particular, we're offering a discount for some of the Oracle offerings that are coming up in late January. So this is the week of January 27th. Our sales team has allowed us to give you a 30% discount on either of these two classes. And the way you'll get that discount is to use the code OracleJan30 when you check out or when you book the class on our website. So you can take a look at those two offerings. You'll be able to find them either by navigating to those course outlines, or if you click on the schedule tab on our website, you'll see the list of all of the classes we have coming up. If you pick either of these and use the code OracleJan30 at checkout, you'll be able to get 30% off of those just for having attended today's webinar. So be sure to take advantage of that. So having said all of that, we'll now turn it over to John and hear what he has to say about Oracle today, 19C performance.
All right, thank you very much, David. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you very much to David for the first part of the webinar today. He'll join us again at the end to wrap up a few things. So my name's John Mullins, as David had said. You saw my background and experience there. Today we're going to be talking about some of the Oracle 19c new features that are related to performance. So that's our objective. I've kind of picked out a few here, kind of a handful. I got about 6 of these today to look at. We'll go into a lot of caveats with each one of these as well. With these new features, as you know, with new features from the past, some new features, they're great. We love them. They do a lot for us. They may be good for performance, functionality, and such. Other new features, not so much, right? I mean, with a brand new big version release, we can see over 500 new features in some of those related to all kinds of different options and different areas within the Oracle database or within tools and such that also access the Oracle database. So we know that some are okay and some are not so okay, and that's okay. We also know that initially when a new version or release comes out, sometimes all the new features that are related to it aren't available on every platform. You know, we've got Oracle Enterprise Edition and Standard Edition, and we even have Express Edition, but then we also have, engineered systems like Oracle Exadata that's available to us. And so sometimes when it first comes out, it's not quite available on everything, and Oracle's pretty good about letting us know that, hey, these features are only available, like when some of these new latest versions of Oracle came out, they said it's only available up in the cloud with Oracle's cloud version. And sometimes people weren't too happy with that, but eventually it made it down to like the on-premise type of databases and such as well. So sometimes we have to be a little bit patient, and that's okay. We can deal with that. So some of these versions, some of these options or features we're going to look at today, I'll kind of give you the latest information I have on them, but keep in mind that that information can change, and who knows when it's going to change, right? It could change today as we're talking, it could change tomorrow or a month from now or a year from now or maybe never. So some of these kind of fall into that category of maybe it's not available everywhere yet, but we'll look forward to it eventually being into those areas. Releasing these in a kind of a limited capacity gives kind of Oracle a focus point to see how it's going to work in that area, and if it works well in that area, they roll it out to some of the other platforms there. So that's what will be going on today. I threw in this extra slide here today about some notes. You'll see it here on the screen. So some of the features, like I just mentioned, are available to some of the Oracle engineered type systems like Exadata, maybe only in the cloud on Exadata, and some of these features we'll talk about today will be available everywhere. The ones that I mentioned that, today, as of today, with the latest information that I've been given, if I say it's today, it looks like it's only available on Exadata, don't stop listening at that point, because some of these features are really good, and I really imagine that at some point in time they'll be available on some of the other platforms as well. So, but at least make a note of that, or when you get a copy of the slides, keep that in mind, because, and that also gives you an opportunity to ask about it down the road as well with your Oracle contact person, or either internally or externally, to say, hey, I saw this cool feature that's in 19c. It looks like it's only available on this platform. We're running this platform. What do you know about it? Can I expect to see it in the future, and approximately when? So some of that. I also mentioned here in this last bullet, I don't have an Exadata system myself. However, I was able to test these features with an undocumented parameter. You see it down here at the bottom, this underscore Exadata underscore feature underscore on. I was able to set that to true, stop and restart my instance, and now I was able to, even though I'm just running 19c, I'm running 19.3, I was able to test some of these features that were intended for, at least initially with Exadata. I could test them out though. All right, so I just wanted to let you know that ahead of time coming into this. Also, some of the features today I'm going to go through in a fair amount of detail, even though we have a fairly short amount of time. And some of these other features are more along the lines of, oh, by the way, here's this feature. The title of it sounds really cool. Here's a little bit of detail about it, but we won't go into as much detail on some of these as we will others. But I want to kind of plant the seed and get it into your head that, oh, that feature looks pretty cool. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. We'll look into it as much as we can for today. All right, with that all said, let's jump in here and take a look at some of these. I tried to put on each of these slides for each of these different features where they might be offered, at least initially, but I also put a very important sentence on there: check for availability on other licenses or other platforms too. Because like I said, this stuff's changing all the time out there. And sometimes I'm surprised, I'm talking about it one day and boom, the same afternoon, here comes an announcement from Oracle about its availability. First feature here is called automatic indexing. All right, this one's, I think, kind of interesting. This is one of those features I like to put into a category of if you're going to consider this, to really thoroughly test it. Some of the features, it's like, you're probably thinking, oh, we need to do that on every new feature, right? Who wouldn't do that? But from place to place that I go and visit with people in classes or otherwise, you'd be surprised how many people, what their testing processes are like. So not everybody's going to test necessarily as thoroughly as you might, but this is one that I think warrants that. It says here it's going to automatically create, rebuild, drop indexes based on a workload. Okay, there's a background process that's running out there that every 15 minutes it's going to go out. It's going to be basically checking execution plans, checking statistics, things like that, to try to find those particular queries that it thinks can be improved by adding an index, right? And a lot of us are doing that manually, explicitly ourselves today, right? We're going out there usually in a reactive type of mode when somebody reports that, oh, my query's running slow, can you take a look into it? We go through the usual steps. We run it through the explain plan utility. We run it through other queries that we've set up previously. We run it through various tools. We maybe run an AWR report or an ADDM report, or we're looking at Enterprise Manager, depending on our job role. We have all kinds of tools out there that will help us identify, diagnose different SQL type of problems. But this is going to do some of that for us. So that sounds pretty cool. Notice here it says that if tables have stale statistics, they're not considered. So, whoever's in your environment is responsible for keeping your object statistics up to date and accurate, and make sure that all objects have statistics and they're not missing. That'll be an important thing here. So a little bit of overhead running in the background is they're trying to be a little bit more proactive, because we know that performance issues don't always get reported in a timely fashion as we're going out there. So that's kind of a first slide there, overview of it. Here's what happens. And I'm going to show you a number of different options that you can use to configure and manage this particular feature. But he's going to go out there, but if this is enabled, and create what are called invisible indexes. Now, invisible indexes have been around for a while, right? Many of you may be already using that. We talk about invisible indexes like in our SQL tuning type classes or our database tuning type classes. So it's been around for a little while now. An invisible index is an index that's out there. It's actually physical, so it's really there. But the optimizer who decides on what our execution plans look like for our SQL doesn't know about invisible indexes unless we tell the optimizer that to consider an invisible index. So we have different parameters that we set either at a session level or at a system level, that we usually at a session level to start with, right? We create an invisible index. We wonder, okay, what's going to happen if the optimizer knows about it? How will it affect my current query that I'm trying to improve? How will it affect other queries? Hopefully not in a negative way. And so we can make indexes invisible and visible, and we can toggle that back and forth. We can also use invisible indexes to kind of test what's the impact if I take away an index, because maybe I've got several indexes on a particular table. Some are single column indexes, some are multi-column indexes with columns in various orders. What happens if I get rid of this one? And I can make it invisible without actually dropping it. So that's what happens here. It's taking advantage of a feature that's already out there. It's going to make an index invisible. Those invisible indexes, through that process that's out there running, we'll try to validate that. You may also be familiar with a past feature that's still around called the SQL Tuning Advisor. It does a very simple thing, and in this case, Oracle is calling upon something just like that or exactly like that to say, hey, if I were to make these invisible indexes valid, how would that change the plan? If you've ever run the SQL Tuning Advisor, it does just that. It'll go out there and say, here's the execution plan without the index, here's the execution plan with the index. And then you can decide, what to do from that point. Okay, if that process that's running automatically for us, if it determines that our statement could be improved, or in other words, the performance of the statement could be improved, then it's going to make the index visible. Now, I know from the past, having worked with Oracle for over 30 years now, that as we get new versions and new versions and new versions, a lot of people that have been doing this a while, they're a little bit leery about automatic anything, right? Especially until we get a real good feeling for how reliable it can be. So, do you want the database software to determine whether or not to add visible indexes, usable indexes, almost without really any input from you? So some people kind of want to full control over that just to make sure. Other people maybe want to kind of combine, okay, I'll take what Oracle's saying here and maybe I'll review it, and if this is the case, I'll go with it. Okay, so I'll just let you know about that too. If the feature decides the performance is not really being improved by these indexes, and performance with an index is, it's pretty clear cut. Does it reduce the amount of I/O that I have, the number of blocks I have to read, things like that, in order to improve it. You run it through Explain Plan. There's a cost associated with that. Is this cost with the index? Is it less than the cost without the index, and so on and so on. Lots of considerations there for, does this index really improve my statement or not, other than just the classic eye test. Wow, that was a lot faster, just by seeing it run. But if the feature decides that, hey, I considered this index, but you know what, it's not really improving performance, then it marks that invisible index as unusable, and those are cleaned up by the process later on. They'll eventually be dropped at some point. You see here that 370 days is the default, but that can be changed as well. I'll show you some options here in just a moment where that can be changed to whatever number you want to make it. So it's doing a lot of things for us. Now, how's it doing all this? Well, we have a new stored procedure called configure, so when we want to set that up, we can run that. It's in the DBMS auto index package. And then here on several pages, I won't go through these in great detail, but just to point them out to you. And if you get a copy of the slides, you have it as reference material later on. Here's some settings you can do. So it takes several different arguments depending on what you're trying to do here. So like here's an auto index mode. We can say implement. That turns on automatic indexing, and then here's what you have to be careful about. It also makes those indexes eventually visible, maybe at some point, if it improves performance. We can do the report only. That's kind of a good one maybe to start with, especially in your non-production environments, but like your QA environment or your performance testing environment, if you have those. There's a report only option. And you'll see a little bit later on here, we can create reports as well. And we also have some data dictionary views we can look at also. So report only, make these invisible, but I'll be able to, look at these and make a decision on my own eventually. Here's some other settings. You can turn it off, of course. If I can turn it on, of course I can turn it off. This is kind of nice, the second sub-bullet here. I can exclude certain schemas, certain users from this particular feature. So even though I have it turned on for some schemas, maybe for some other schemas I want to exclude from that, so that it's not part of that feature, that it's not it's SQL underneath that particular schema is not being scrutinized by this feature. That's kind of cool. And then lastly here, I got a couple more, but lastly on this page here, I can change, there's that retention where I can change that. So in this example here, I'm changing it to 90 instead of 373. Very simple to do, just using that configure store procedure. Here's one more here. And of course, if it's building an index, it's got to build it somewhere. And so here we can tell it what table space to put the index in. Otherwise, it's going to go to a default table space for, whatever schema is executing the different procedures in the particular package that comes with this feature there. So highly recommend that. And there's a whole bunch of other features too. Related to this one, you can also determine if this is going into a table space like where you have other indexes in it maybe. You can also tell it and specify what percentage that you want these auto indexes to take up also. Okay, so that's a little bit about what auto indexing as far as trying to set it up, some of the different options we can use there. Now, we can run reports. These are very good. In the DBMS auto index package, we have a couple of different functions that are available to us. So just access them just like you would any other supplied function from Oracle. You could use the dual table or whatever. So there's one's called report activity, one's called report last activity. So report activities going back and looking at stuff from the last 24 hours or so. Report last activities just showing from the last maybe query that you ran. And the nice thing is these two functions also have some additional features where you can get the report either in text or HTML format. That's kind of nice too. So we can report on the activity either for an entire day or just for a single query as well. All right, here's some data dictionary views that we could also query. Some of these have been around forever, like DBA indexes, all indexes, user indexes. Those have been around, but a lot of these new, some of the data dictionary views aren't new, but they've added a new column called auto. And so you may see a yes or a no in there in that particular column. And then of course we have some new data dictionary views as we always get when we have some new features out there. So the DBA auto index config, and there's others as well in addition to what you see here. So here's another way you can kind of tell what's going on your particular system. So we want to take advantage of those. All right, so that's our first one, automatic indexing views. As David mentioned at the start, if at any point in time you have some questions, with our short period of time, it's always good to jot those questions down and then email me just as soon as you can. So jmullins@themisinc.com, send those to me. I'll get back to you right away on some of those, or all those questions you have, but I'll get back to you on those. All right, so that first one, again, check your licensing, make sure it's available to what you're running there. I know some of you are running Exadata, some of you aren't. Here's one that's available on all versions, all platforms for 19C, hint usage reporting. This one's kind of cool. As you know, if you ever tried using hints before, there's a little reminder at the bottom of the page what a hint looks like in case you're not that familiar with hints or you haven't really used them at all. It just started with a / * sign and kind of moves on from there. Then you put in your hint name and any arguments that hint may take. And we know that the hint names are important because if you put in a bad hint name, we know that by default, it doesn't really tell you. It just basically ignores it and treats it as a comment. Or in the arguments that you pass to it, same kind of thing. So you don't always, if you mess up the hint specification here, it doesn't really tell you, although indirectly you can see that like through some explain plan output that, oh, he didn't take my hint. Well, maybe he didn't take your hint because your hint was invalid. That's where this kind of comes into play. So hints are nothing new. A lot of debate on how much we should use hints and things like that. So we won't go into that today, but we do that in our classes for sure. And when I'm out talking to people about SQL tuning or trying to help them with some of the questions they have, that's a grand debate. And some places use a lot of hints and some places don't use any at all. And most places are kind of in between as needed. And you'll see a lot of documentation out on the internet and reference book talking about that as well. But this particular feature is kind of cool. You know, it's not doing a whole lot, but at least it's going to let me know those things that I didn't know before. So this is enabled by default. It's going to provide various ways that we can come up with some reports on hint usage. So if you provide a hint, I want to know, did you use it or not? Other than me trying to, figure that out by looking at a trace report or by looking at explain plan output. I want to know. Well, they've made it very simple for us. All right. So the DBMS XPlan package, that's been around forever, but they've added some new options to that. And I'm going to show you, I think, here 3 different ways, and I'm going to show you some sample output as well, and then we'll move on. So there's a DBMS XPlan in there. There's a function called display cursor that if we pass it the SQL ID that we want to take a look at, and the new option is this hint report that I have in uppercase here. Right, hint report's one of them. We can also say hint report used or hint report unused, but hint report combines both used and unused hints. So what the report's going to show us is, here's the hints that you specified, and oh, by the way, I either used it or I didn't. If I did not use it, it's also going to tell me why. It's going to give me a reason why. Either it's an invalid hint name itself, or I provided invalid arguments, or I didn't do it correctly, so it'll say something like unresolved, all kinds of things there. So with the DBMS XPlan package and the programs in there, I have this nice hint report option now. Right? I can also do it with without providing, say, an SQL ID, because sometimes, depending on your job role, maybe you don't have access to an SQL ID. Every SQL that gets run gets an SQL ID applied to it, assigned to it. And if you're able to look up in memory in the shared pool, you can see what those are. And we have various views for allowing us to do that, like $SQL, for example. If you're looking at an AWR report, it would show up in there. If you're looking at explain output, it would show up in there. So if we don't know that SQL ID, here's another way to get the report also. Or if you're an SQL Plus type user, you can also use the set auto trace on, which gives us an explain plan output. So it'll show up in a number of different places, and it's very easy to get to. All right, so we run one of those different ways, and here's what we're going to get. So typically you'll see what? The explain plan output and everything that comes with it. But now at the bottom of that type of report, you're going to get something that looks like this. So I didn't show the rest of the report so I can get everything on a slide here, but maybe you're trying to show your execution plan of a statement. It shows you that, oh, I started with this table and I joined it to this table, did a nested loop join, blah, 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 right? And then at the bottom of that report, you're going to get this new section called hint report. And then you'll notice here, it'll say total hints for the statement, how many there are, and then that'll give you kind of a high level status of using that hint. So in this case here, I'm going to show you 6 different examples just real quick here of using some of and there's a whole bunch more that it could come up with here too. All right, so like down in here in the hint report, I might see this. To see a U up here says unused. Okay, so it just says I didn't use the hint. It's not necessarily telling me why in this case. Maybe that's something that'll come down the road. But so here I have a use NL, use a nested loop join between these 2 table aliases or correlation IDs, D and E. That's the department table and the employee table here. Said it didn't use it. Now, I need to go back and look at it and make sure that I specified the hint correctly and all that, because it may be unused because I didn't pass in the arguments correctly. I'm missing this, I'm missing that, and that could be the case there. So one of the statuses you'll see down here will be unused for sure. In this example, here's an example of it actually using the hint, because notice here it says total hints for the statement 1, doesn't give me any other information, and then down below there's no status code, if you want to call it that, like a U or an E. E stands for error. That'll come up too. You'll see that here in just a few moments. So here it tells me, hey, great, I used your hint. I want to do a full table scan on the department table. All right, example 3 here. Here's an example of it combining the 2. So notice up here at the top, it says total hints for the statement. There's 3. I provided 3 hints. One of them was unresolved, and one was an error. We say, well, what about the third one? Well, the third one's down here it did a full table scan on the emp table, and that one it actually used. So out of the 3 hints, one of them was used. One was an error. You can see here E for error, hint 2. Well, that's not a valid hint name, so it gave me an error for invalid hint name. And then the top one here, this one on an index hint, I have IX1. It says unresolved on that particular one. So index is a valid hint name, but my arguments that I passed to it, it says based on those arguments, I wasn't able to do anything with it. It's unresolved. And I was unresolved basically means I need more information where you provided me some bad information. We typically know with an index hint what? We provide not only the index name, but also the table name. Okay, so just a couple more examples there. Here's one with an error. Again, I had that use nested loop hint join or method here, or I should say hint here. It says it's an error. That's a valid hint name. However, what's the error in this case? Oh, it needs some arguments. I didn't provide the arguments. Without this hint report, when I use the use NL and I look at the explain plan output and it shows it still did a hash join, I'm wondering, okay, I guess it didn't take my hint. And it doesn't give me a reason why it didn't use my hint. Here I'm saying, trying to tell me that, hey, I didn't use your hint, John, because you didn't give me a valid argument list here, or you didn't use the use NL hint correctly. Here's like we saw earlier. So you're going to get, you can get a U, you can get it for unresolved, you can get an N for not used, you can get an E for an error. Hint 1 is not a valid hint name. And then lastly here's 2 of them that are not used, and the reason being is that they're unresolved on both of them. Now, here's a kind of an example of one that's not so obvious. I didn't show you the query on this one, but in the query, I'm doing a join between the employee table and the department table, and I'm providing table aliases like E and D. Well, as soon as you assign those aliases in there, you need to refer to the qualifying type table names and such as E and D, and no longer as emp and dep. Well, that's the problem here. In my hint, I'm trying to specify dep when I've already specified an alias of D for it. So he says, I don't know what dep is. It's unresolved. I should have put a D there. So in this case here, it's telling you these are unresolved. You kind of need to know what are some of the various reasons why something might be unresolved. And in this case here, it might be because I'm pointing to a table name when I should be pointing to an alias name for that table. So those are just 6 examples of some of the things you might see in the hint report. Again, they're always at the bottom of whatever produced that report, usually an execution plan. Wherever execution plans can be generated, you'll get something like this now, which is nice. It's out there by default also. So that one's kind of cool, just to give me more information if I'm a hint type user, even in just specific cases. All right, we have a few more here to look at. How about this one's kind of cool, and part of this has been around for a while. It's called real-time statistics. Notice at the bottom, it's available in Exadata only, and I did test this one out with 19.3, and sure enough, if I was not in Exadata, it didn't do anything for me, but if I was in an Exadata type of platform, it worked just as advertised, and this one's kind of good. Look at the 3rd bullet there. In Oracle 12c, which you hear a lot of people talk about, well, 18c and 19c are just extensions to 12c. They're really 12c like release 3 and release 4 or whatever numbers added to it. That's why we didn't see a huge number of new features in both of those. But 12c first came out with something similar to this, where depending on how we're adding data to our table, statistics could be updated automatically in real time for us, and we didn't have to do that automatically ourselves, or the DBAs maybe, through the DBMS stats package, for example. So we know if we did a create table as select, any type of bulk operations that it considers to be bulk, just like a create table as select is considered, or direct path inserts, which you can get from either using a hint like append on an insert statement, or through some tools like SQL Loader, that's already out there from the earlier releases of 12c. What this does is it extends that particular feature to just regular DML operations, just a regular old insert or delete type statement, it's going to apply to that now with this particular feature, which is good. The problem it's trying to address is sometimes people will do, mass insert or delete, and that's part of a step of a process. Either they're doing it interactively, manually themselves, or it's part of a batch process that you have scripted in a file, but we forget to, at the very end, to update our statistics. They might get updated through a batch job later that night or the next day, whenever it is, but real time right now, I forgot to do that, and that happens. I've seen it happen many times. Some people won't forget that, other people will. But this is trying to address that. So at the end of that operation, it will update statistics now for conventional type stuff. And when it does that, you'll notice here at the bottom of this slide here, we can see that that's been done in various data dictionary views, for example. One of them happens to be all tab statistics. Just like it was the automatic indexing where it added the auto column to a lot of views out there, with this particular feature, they've added the notes column. And you'll see it in the notes column, this will be exactly what you'll see. It'll say stats on conventional DML. If you go out there and look at your database object stats, you'll see stats that were gathered by normal batch processes like through the DBMS stats package. And you'll also now see additional records in those views showing you the statistics that were gathered from real-time statistics. So now you can get, if this is being used, now you'll see two sets of statistics, right? Now, notice the first bullet up at top, that's very important. It says that this particular feature is going to augment the traditional statistics we've been gathering forever. So it's not replacing that. So it's not going to gather all the statistics that were used to being gathered, just what it considers to be the most important ones, like the number of rows, number of distinct values, and things like that. So even though this might be running on your particular platform and system, you should still gather your traditional statistics just like you are today. Maybe it's a batch job and it runs at night at 2 a.m. or once a week on the weekend, or whatever you have scheduled, or whatever your procedure is for doing that. So we want to do this in place of that. But this what it's trying to do is what? Keep your statistics up to date as much as possible, because we know that those statistics have a great influence on what the optimizer comes up with when trying to decide your execution plan. So I think this is a really good one. Of course, as we're doing this, it's adding overhead to that insert statement or delete statement or whatever we're running. But is the overhead at that point in time, is that worth it versus we don't update our statistics, say at 10 in the morning after we've had some inserts added to our particular table, and the queries that come after it, and maybe an execution plan being changed because of that, or not the correct execution plan, not the most efficient. That's why they try to, minimize the overhead by saying we're only going to augment those statistics rather than generate the entire, suite of those statistics like you would normally. So I think that's a good feature. Remember, it says it's for Exadata only, as is this one here, which I won't go into too much detail on. We've set up our own batch jobs. Most people have DBAs or non-DBAs, especially in non-production environments, the non-DBAs that goes out and generates, new statistics. And it could be based on events like, oh, tonight we're going to load up 4 million records. Oh, and that's done. I want to regenerate statistics maybe for that table or related tables or whatever, or for every table if they need it. And we know we're only generating statistics typically for those objects that have missing statistics or what are called stale statistics, which means the data from the statistics is different from the real-time data. The default is by more or less than 10%. So what they're doing here is they're saying, hey, if you've got a system where your volume of data could go up a lot or down a lot throughout the day because of that's just the nature of your application, then they're saying, we'll try to keep that up to date for you by running this what's called high frequency statistics gathering. And the default is 15 minutes, but we can change that. Now, I know several places at least that they put in their own, before this feature was available, they put in their own batch jobs that'll go out every hour or even every 15 minutes like this does. They're running DBMS stats on specific objects throughout the course of the day, and then at night they do it for their broader range of tables there. So people have been doing this manually, explicitly themselves in the past, but now here's a feature that could replace what we're doing or just in addition to what we're doing. All right, I got a couple more here for you, so hang with me, just got a couple more. This one's really cool, and this one's available on all platforms, so you don't need Exadata, thank goodness on this one. So if you're not running Exadata, here's a good one for you. Execution plan comparison. There may be other tools out there that are available for you to do this with, but again, with our DBMS XPlan package, we have a new function called compare plan. And it can give us a report in XML, HTML, or text format that's going to take two execution plans for whatever two statements you want to compare and give you a report. Okay. Again, the SQL Tuning Advisor does something like this already and has for a number of years. They kind of pulled some of those features out, I think, either as is or modified them slightly for us to use out here also. So kind of cool. So I'm going to show you this one in a little more detail, and then we'll start to wind down a bit. So here's two statements. They're exactly the same, except on the first one I have a hint, and on the second one I don't. Okay, otherwise they're just the same. So maybe I want to compare the execution plan of the first one to the second one to see, okay, does it change actually when I give it a hint from what it was without the hint? Now, yes, we can do this ourselves and go through this manually and run through multiple steps. This is going to make it easy for us and do it in basically single step here for us. All right, so here's kind of the sequence of events that we need to do. For using this function within the DBMS XPlan package, we need to know the SQL IDs of the statements we're comparing. So we've already run them. You can get the SQL IDs from a number of places, either from memory, or if you run it through Explain Plan, it'll give you the ID there, or in the AWR report, you can see it in there. If you're not sure what the AWR report, AWR stands for Automatic Workload Repository. If that's something that's not your responsibility to run, of course, you could get that from your DBAs. So we get the IDs first, and then we're going to run that compare plans function. And this is just an example using SQL Plus. You could run this from other environments too, like SQL Developer or wherever. So I'm going out here. For those two statements I just showed you, I already got their IDs. I got those out of the shared pool in memory. I plug those in here. I tell it what kind of report I want. I want a text report, and I execute the compare plans, and it puts the resulting report in this variable, in this case, in vrep, which I just declared to be a CLOB, a character large object. Okay. All right, and then once I've done that, I'm going to view the report. Okay, so down in here, I'm just going to select that CLOB, that vrep there from Dual. And then here's what I'm going to get in my report. I just kind of pulled it out in sections here. You'll get here, it says, okay, what schema was running this report, student is who I was connected to Oracle as, how many plans were we comparing to, how many, oh, it came up with some findings, came up with 2 findings, great. Gives me some high-level information about each SQL statement. It has a plan number for it. Did it find the plan in memory? Yes, it did. That's what the cursor cache is. There's the SQL ID again. And then at the bottom there, importantly, it shows you, hey, here's the SQL that goes along with that ID. No hint on this one. Then here's the second one. Gives me the same kind of information. This one has the hint, as you can see down there at the bottom. All right, now what it's going to do next is it'll show you the execution plans for both of those statements, and then kind of like the hint report at the very bottom, it'll give you this section titled Comparison Results. And it can give you all kinds of different results down here. This one just says, the plans, this one's basically telling you the plans are different. The top one's missing some lines from the bottom one's missing some lines from the top one, and so on. So this one's kind of vague, but it is telling you that basically, oh, your plans aren't the same. Now, it could give you some additional information that's more specific. In this case, it's very general and very vague, which may not be very helpful, or maybe it is. At least at this point in time, without having to go through and run those execution plans myself and such, I know their plans aren't the same, and now I can look into it further. So it's a lot of these features are meant to kind of aid you in your diagnostic type of process of trying to figure out what's going on with performance here. Okay, so again, a new function within the DBMS XPlan package. And I haven't looked in the latest release of like SQL Developer to see if this option happens to be available in there. I would imagine if it's not now, that I could see that as something they would add down the road for sure. All right, so that one's kind of cool, and that one's available to us wherever. Okay, last ones here I'll just mention as, oh, by the way, these are kind of interesting. The first one is this SQL Quarantine feature. It's only available if you're using Oracle Resource Manager. You know, with Oracle Resource Manager, we can set certain resource limits, like on how much memory we can use or how much CPU we can use, and other things in there as well, I/O, whatever. And if we hit those limits, you know, what is the Oracle Resource Manager's task to do at that point? What is its reaction? What this does here is that if you hit a certain limit, it's going to, rather than just terminating your execution of the statement, it's also going to quarantine it so that that particular plan that caused that limit to be exceeded won't be used again. Okay, and there's a new package for that too called DBMS_SQLQ for quarantine there. So that one's kind of interesting. I think that is worth looking into further, but also notice you need to check your licensing to see where that's available. And as my last resources said, Exadata only. And then lastly here is our automatic SQL Plan Management. So this is the last one we'll look at today. This uses a feature that's been around for a while called SQL Plan Baselines. And this is another one of those features for today. We're just going to say, oh, by the way, this is out there, but this, you know, is going out there basically and identifying statements that consume, you know, certain amount of resources, identifies best plans. You know, SQL Plan Baselines is what? Maybe a series of different plans that could be applied to my SQL statements. Some are good. Obviously, I have an optimal plan, but I have other plans in there that maybe were used in the past. And so this is, if your statement goes out there and it chugs and uses a lot of resources out on the system, it says basically, okay, but that plan was horrible because it caused this SQL to run for a long time and consume a lot of resources. So let me go back to my baseline and see what other plans I have available to me. And that's what this feature is doing. And we kind of have that already in place for the baselines, but this is the part that's going to go out and do a little extra work that we had to do in the past, you know, manually ourselves. So just, oh, by the way, that one's out there as well. So we looked at, you know, 6 different ones there. Here's a few extra just on the SQL Plan Management. To turn it on, just to let you know, in case you are interested in this one, there's a couple new parameters. Alternate plan baseline and alternate plan source. The plan source is available everywhere. The plan baseline not. So use whichever plan setting with that parameter that you need there. And these parameters have been around for a little bit, at least from the start of 12C, and now they're just, this feature is being enhanced, basically. Remember, some new features, we say new features, but some of them are actually old features that are being enhanced, and some of the features are just brand new that we've never seen before. All right, so today that was our look at you know, 6 different features there. Some of them you can run anywhere. Some of them, at least currently, might only be available in the cloud or only available in a engineered system like Exadata. But always, always, always check to see, because that's always changing. Things get out of date, whatever, so always check on that. And you could always try it in your environment, and if it doesn't, sometimes you'll get an error message saying, hey, this feature's not offered. Other times it just won't do anything. So you get kind of inconsistencies. You know, if it doesn't do anything, it's like, okay, am I using this feature correctly, or is it not available in this environment? Other times you'll get an error. So hopefully, you know, going through some of those 6 there, I think, you know, the ones in particular that are available everywhere, you know, the hint reporting on that, the execution plan comparison, those are kind of cool. But some of the other ones I think are cool too, like the automatic indexing is kind of a good one also, but maybe not available on the platform you're running. All right, hopefully that'll kind of get your thought process going. If you're already in 19C or you have 19C down the road for you, this will kind of start your thinking process, maybe look into some of these things a little bit more detail to see what's going on. Of course, thoroughly test every one of those. Down the road, if as David had said earlier today, we have a number of classes that are available. If you go out to themisinc.com, you can see those under the courses tab. You can see those available to you. If you don't see a course or topic you need, you can always shoot us an email. You can shoot me an email, you can shoot David an email, or John Cacavel is the person to talk to as well. There's his email on the screen, jcac@themisinc.com. And remember, the webinars are out there as well under the /webinar tab, the webinar tab at the top of the page. Remember, David also mentioned at the start of this webinar that, hey, if you got some interest down the line as we go into the new year, good time to learn some new stuff. Late in January, the week of 127, we got a couple of PL SQL classes going. But again, if you go out to the themisinc.com and up at the top, there'll be a schedule tab. You can click on that and see a full list of classes, not only for Oracle, but for DB2, CICS, Java. All the new stuff is out there. So Postgres SQL, Python, lots of good stuff out there. But for at least these Oracle classes here in January, if you put in that code when you register and go through the process there, Oracle Jan 30, that'll give you, hey, a 30% discount. That's pretty good. I like that. You see the dates there. You can start, signing up for those right away. PL SQL is something that it's a very popular type of topic. It's a full-blown programming language. We write store procedures, functions, packages, triggers in it. Got 3 days of introduction, 2 days of advanced. Those are both offered the same week, back to back. You can take one, you can take the other, you can take both. So just a reminder on that, plus just jot that down. All right, we do have another, like David said, about once a month we have webinars coming up. Our next one will be in January, titled Mainframe Modernization Overview. It's on January 23rd. And all of ours typically will start around 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So if you go out to our website, upcoming webinars are out there, past webinars are out there. Like David said, we have about 4 years of that out there of inventory of all kinds of different webinars, and those are all free for you to view. And if you have any questions, feel free to send any of us an email. Again, mine's jmullins@themisinc.com. And I'd like to thank you for being here today. And to wrap up today, I'm going to turn over this last bit here to David. Everybody have a good weekend coming up, and I hope to see you in a future webinar or a future class.
Hey, thanks, John. As you can probably tell, John is really good at this stuff. If you'd like to see more of him, as he said, you can visit our website, view old webinars, or sign up for classes that John teaches. One of the things we don't mention often enough is that if you have enough people at your site and you want a class, you can email us and we will send you a proposal to send somebody to you. So we can also do on-site training if you have a big enough group. John Cacavel, whose email address is on the screen, is the guy to reach out to about that. You can also feel free to reach out to John about any technical questions or any questions about our Oracle or other curriculum. So he's really good at answering those as well. As a reminder, the slides from today are available at themisinc.com/webinars. So if you go out there right now, the slides are available, and the replay of this webinar will be available in the next day or so. Thanks everybody for attending. Hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend, and we hope to see you in a future webinar or class.